coming back to the key points and driving those home.
Yeah.
Definitely preparation, internalizing the lesson plans, and having appropriate anchor charts and key points.
Yep, and I saw that in your pre-work, just around, like, you mentioned circling back to the key points, and that you have your anchor charts always up, ready to go, central location, constantly referring back to them, which I would say is definitely a strength. And also really appreciate the fact that, like, the anchor charts are relevant to children, and you're like, great, this is what we're going after today. This is what we need to know. This is how we're going to go after it, which makes it really clear. Anything else you want to call out there?
No, that's it.
The results here were really powerful. So in your Aztecs, you had 45% of kids who were at mastery, and the Lakers 22%. Huge boost from, like, where you were at the beginning of the year, where it was like literally like 100% of kids were below basic, right? And really nice to see that you got 11% of kids now below basic, 26% in the Lakers, slightly higher here, and we'll kind of work through this today. Cool. Tell me the standards that you focused on and why.
For to reteach,
The lowest performing standards.
I said 3.2, 3.5, and 3.9. I said for 3.2 was being able to explain how the lesson or moral is, like, conveyed through the text. So I think that those misconceptions come from being able to A, identify the lesson, and B, use text as a support their thinking. And then the next one was, like, being able to refer to different texts and how they, like, build on each other. Because especially for this unit, it was like the nonfiction text, and then they had to use the historical fiction text to support what a character was thinking. And yeah, it became coming back to character mental state. I think is a huge thing that they need to, was a new skilling to help them work on.
3.5. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Oh, sorry, I did all those together. 3.2 was the first one, the lesson or moral.
Yeah.
3.5 was using the two different texts to support one another. And then 3.9 is being able to compare and contrast different, like, themes across stories. So I think that one comes back to being able to identify the proper theme, and then how is it the same in two texts and how it's different.
Cool. Lowest questions, and I agreed with you. 3.2, 3.5, 3.9, lowest performing. I focused on 3.2 and 3.5 though, because that was where you had the lowest mastery. So you had 50% mastery on 3.2 and 60% mastery on 3.5.
Yeah.
3.9 you had 70% mastery. So still some work to do there in small groups. We, like, ideally would want to be at 80%, but I think we've got a few standards that we can prioritize here. 3.2, what question did you?
9, the open-ended response.
What was the question?
It was, what is the big idea of out of the West? What in the text makes you think that?
Yeah, and so think about, so let's actually go back from our unit plan. What were some of the skills that kids needed to be able to access to be successful in this question?
I said identify what the author wants the reader to understand, identify the best answer, and then use evidence to support your thinking. That was the 3 out of our view.
Yep. And then what structure do you want them to answer in?
Race.
Yep.
That was next steps, like I wrote.
Race. Exclamation point.
Yeah.
Great. Points possible were 1, and you had 85% of kids at a 0. And I actually appreciate you being more rigorous in the scoring, because I think sometimes the easiest place to inflate scores is the constructed response. Yeah. And then you had 15% of kids at a 1 point. Let's take a look at your 1 point first to set the bar around what we thought was an exemplary answer.
I think the Inverness is probably really good. This where 1.
Cool.
Larissa from the Aztecs.
Okay, I'll read this and then you can read that one out loud.
Okay.
What is the big idea of Out West? What in the text makes you think that? The big idea of Out West is that Eliza and her family are moving and Eliza doesn't want to move. I know this because in the text it said, quote, Eliza sighed, she had been happy at their home in Ohio, end quote. That made me think that Eliza does not want to move and she wants to stay in her old home in Ohio. What makes this an exemplary answer?
She uses race, first of all, so she restates her question, answers it, uses evidence to support her thinking, and she has a closing argument, or a closing sentence.
And then also, specifically about the evidence, it matches the lesson.
Yeah.
Cool, you want to read the other one?
Yeah. This story is about a girl that did not want to move, and they have to because after the Civil War. Eliza's dad wanted a better life for Eliza and the rest of their family. I know this because in the text it says that Dad, it's time for a fresh start for all of us. That is the big idea.
Okay.
So this one's not as strong, but I still gave her credit because she caught the right
How's it going, Bob? I haven't seen you.
answer, and she did use evidence to support it, even though it's
What was it?
after reading
There
her one, it's
was.
like, oh, it's not as
There
strong.
was,
Yeah.
and,
What do you think makes this less
30%
strong than
and
this
we
one?
ended about
The evidence.
40.
Yeah.
So, just like
And plus, I think there's a
Right now,
level
most
of
of the
clarity
emails right
here,
now.
right?
Mhm.
Big idea is blank.
Yeah.
Then,
What
so
was
very
it- was
clearly
it
answers it,
well-facilitated?
provides some context, right? It says Eliza doesn't want to move,
yes and
then
no.
provides
I
the
think
text
that
evidence.
we started off
concludes
like
it. I'd probably say
purposing
if we wanted to
go
make these
after,
answers stronger,
like,
where's the place to
key
make them
goals
stronger?
and stuff like that, and the
Provide more
incident,
context.
because like if
Yeah,
you're
provide more
online,
context and explain the
better try
evidence.
to like move aggressively on those things, but
Context and explain the answer. All right, let's look at some answers that scored a 0.
And her answer, I know that should be that's why I gave her a 0. Didn't give any evidence.
Okay.
sorry.
No, it's okay.
You want to read that one? I'll read this
Yeah.
one. The big idea of out west is Eliza and her family are moving west. I know this because in the text it said, quote, but her father was eager to move west.
So she
What-
doesn't answer the like big idea. She doesn't get to the point where it's like that Eliza doesn't want to move and her family wants to move.
Yeah.
And she doesn't give evidence that supports the big idea, and she doesn't explain her thinking or her evidence.
Yep. So the race structure is missing. Plus, that's actually not the big idea.
Yeah. That was the
So
reason.
the corresponding evidence, whether it matched or not, became irrelevant because the big idea was incorrect. Okay.
The big idea of Out of the West is they are moving.
Okay. What's wrong with that response?
Everything.
There is none.
Yeah. Well, he restated his question, but he didn't get the big idea. He didn't use evidence, and he didn't explain anything. He didn't use race.
Yeah, and I feel like this had the potential to be a really strong answer,
He
right?
got a
Like,
9 out of this thing's Dominic got it. This is Dominic's, and he got. And I remember if it was a 9 or a 10, so that's why I pulled it because I was like.
yeah. So he got 9 out of 10 correct, right? And so it shows you that like he has the potential to give a really strong response, but like there's something in our teaching practice, something in the we do, something in the you do that we're not doing, such that he thinks that then on question 9 he can answer like that, right? So let's talk about that.
Okay.
Great. Some root causes. What were some things that you identified? And think specifically, not about like, oh, kids didn't answer in race. Think about your teaching practice, either in your preparation, your execution, that you think led to students not being successful in that.
Not being explicit enough with race, like when I'm modeling I do's or we do's.
Okay, talk more about that.
Well, I think that especially since now a lot of the I do questions are repopulated,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to just read them or like talk through your thinking and not explicitly be like, restate my question. This is how I restate my question, and not actually like labeling my like thought process as a race response when it's in front of us.
Nice. Okay, good. So you're not like clearly annotating your own thinking as you're going, right?
Yeah.
So let me restate the question first, right? Here I restated the question. Then now I'm going to answer it, right? Okay, cool. What else?
I think also not for myself, like not pushing the students, like when they're answering on their own during the we do, not being like you need to be writing in race, and like letting them slide with like responses that are right but not like in the correct format.
Okay. What about content gap? What were some content gaps that we saw in these responses? So beside the race structure.
I guess probably big idea, like actually hitting home like how to find that big idea. I think that came in the next unit because right now I feel like I'm like really pushing like what theme and big idea is on them, but not so much in the last unit. So they probably didn't have that knowledge to understand the how to key points.
Okay, what is, and so if I were to ask you and say, Lauren, how would you explain big idea to your kids, what would you say?
I would go back to theme probably and talked about lesson because that's what they've been focusing on now. It's like, what is the theme of the story or chapter, and then they know how to do that because we've been constantly going back to the how points like how is the character's problem solved, and that's like what did they learn.
Okay, so to ID big idea, what would you need to do?
What's the character's mental state at the beginning of the story? What's at the end of the story? How did they change, and then what did they learn from solving their problem?
Okay, cool. Next steps. Oh, sorry, one more question.
Mm-hmm.
In execution, what do you think? So you talked a little bit about it in terms of like your preparation. So you talked about like, I wish I was like clearer in my scripting of saying like I should say this is the R, this is the A, this is the C. What about in your execution would you want different such that it would lead to more mastery on this type of a question?
Like being like much more explicit with like how to do something so they understand like this is how you do, and it like for everything like doing like these are the steps on how to master like sorry I can't even talk right now. These are like the how to like key points in order to master like what is lesson, like what do you need to do that.
Yeah, the how-to key points, the having them come alive. Yeah. And I also saw that in your pre-work where you identified your growth area as being like always referencing back to the key points as opposed to just stating them, right? Because you're doing a good job right now just clearly stating them, but always kind of circling back to them in your we do, you do work as well.
I've been making anchor charts for all the how-to key points.
Great! Good! Okay, next steps. Talk to me a little bit about some next steps that you're thinking explicitly for this standard.
I said like use race as much as possible so they're like in their mind that like that's how you answer all open-ended responses. And also I think another like next step is like on my I do and we do like rather than having the I do pre-populated like I will like actually like rewrite my own so that so it's like more organic to like how I teach because I feel like sometimes they're just like pre-populated and I just like print them out but then it's not necessarily like what I would say in front of the students and so being able to do that so I know like when I'm writing the I do responses they understand the process to go through.
Okay, go ahead and write that down. And then I would say with that, you mentioned explicitly also scripting out where you would want to annotate in your own thinking, right?
I'm trying to figure out how I want to say it. Writing own I do response to clearly. Annotate when to
not necessarily when to use race because I would tell kids that anytime you see anytime it's an open-ended response you need to use race, right? You need to use that structure, but I would say annotate how to use race because the more they hear you doing it the more they'll be able to kind of imprint that thinking into their own head. Main idea questions, you guys have a lot of those in this unit right now. And I would also say one place where you can kind of embed this organically, especially in this unit, is in your oral drill, right? So having students either repeat the chant. Have you taught the chant to them yet?
For main idea?
I can send it to you right now. Or actually, I'll just link it in here. Okay. So that you have it for your next steps. And Fahey's kids do such a adorable job with it.
Really?
It's super funny. Teach here. What's another place where you could do some quick hit main idea questions?
guess I was like during the UDO they do them, but